I'm Deacon Frederick Bartels. In a video I uploaded earlier, I read you the Appeal for the Church and the World, which is an appeal from Catholic clergy led by Archbishop Vigano and Cardinals Mueller, Zinn, and Puatz. The appeal exposes some of the grave injustices being perpetrated against humankind and in opposition to the common good, under the pretext of keeping people safe from a tiny creature. I think you can figure out why I'm using that term given the restrictions in place on freedom of expression. In this video, I want to briefly examine some points of evidence to show that the claims found in the appeal are not baseless and unsubstantiated. On the contrary, the warnings found in the appeal are based on observed acts of injustice under a political dictatorship whose motives are directed at unjust control, inciting division among people, and imposing a new social order that excludes many freedoms and rights that are fundamental to the dignity of the human person. The appeal states, "The facts have shown that under the pretext of the epidemic, the inalienable rights of citizens have in many cases been violated and their fundamental freedoms, including the exercise of freedom of worship, expression, and movement, have been disproportionately and unjustifiably restricted." Anyone who's spent 5 minutes reflecting on the attitudes secular elitists hold toward the church knows one of their primary agendas is to attack her, either by attacking what she teaches or by attacking her autonomy, such as her right to public worship. One point the appeal is making is that enemies of the church have seized on an atmosphere of fear, which in many ways is exaggerated and unfounded, in order to remove our right to the free exercise of religion. Of course, this is all done under the premise that these restrictions are temporary and for the sake of our own good. However, this is only the beginning. Once we easily give up our freedom to worship, even if only for a time, it will soon be taken away again for a longer period of time. Let's look at 2 examples of how the fundamental right to the free exercise of religion has been violated. In Washington State, people were banned from meeting in religious gatherings of any size. Not even one-on-one Bible studies were permitted, while so-called essential businesses were given exemptions that allowed people to gather in large numbers and potentially infect others. These businesses included grocery stores, media outlets, and cannabis suppliers. In a few days, entire communities cycled through these retail outlets, rendering self-quarantine protocols ineffective. It took a lawsuit for the state's Democratic Governor Jay Inslee to consent to one-on-one Bible studies. This kind of behavior shows an intolerable level of prejudice against the Christian religion. It's a clear violation of the right to the free exercise of religion. Where I live, religious gatherings were limited to no more than 10 people. Yet while this limitation was placed on churches, hundreds and thousands of people were coming into contact with others each and every day through large retail outlets like City Market, King Soopers, Sam's Club, Walmart, Lowe's, and Home Depot. I'm not saying these retail outlets should be closed. On the contrary, I'm saying the restrictions on public worship are biased, illogical, and ineffective in terms of public safety. They display a prejudice against religion and are violations of religious freedom. Let's not forget that many of these politicians and others who claim to be interested in saving lives are hypocrites. While they claim to uphold public safety, they adamantly uphold the intentional legalized killing of thousands of innocent children each and every day. Governor Cuomo was in a near panic over an ill-perceived shortage of ventilators, while just months earlier he put into place the nation's most barbaric abortion laws. It's a case of the powerful thinking themselves to be gods, whose evil powers allow them to tread upon the weak and crush them underfoot. I want to point out that, at least initially, giving dispensations to the faithful so that they were not required to attend Mass, and encouraging people, especially those in the high-risk categories, to shelter in place at home were probably appropriate measures to take. No sane person is arguing against the use of prudence and caution. Early on, no one really knew what we were dealing with. There were lots of worst-case scenario speculations. and the mainstream news media was all too happy to parrot them. However, things have changed. We now have new data that suggests the tiny creature is not nearly as dangerous as was previously thought, although that data is often suppressed and removed by information elitists. In light of this new data, severe unjust restrictions on religious gatherings and public celebration of the Mass remain in place. The healthy continue to face quarantine protocols. Small businesses remain closed, livelihoods are taken away. All the while, suicide, domestic violence, depression, and drug abuse incidents are spiking. People's lives have been altered in drastic, unrecoverable ways. We now know there was a disproportionate response to tiny creature, and that response is likely causing significant unnecessary damage. How can I say this, you might ask, given the fact that tiny creature is attributed to about 84,000 deaths in the U.S.? Because dangerous tiny creatures are a fact of life. The CDC reports that the flu kills up to about 60,000 people each year in the U.S. Some estimates are as high as 80,000. We don't shut down the economy and public worship during seasons of severe flu, causing spikes in suicide, drug abuse, depression, famine, and violence in the home. Cancer kills 600,000 people a year annually in the U.S. We don't shut down businesses that sell cancer-supporting products like sugar-laden foods. And about 600,000 people die of heart disease annually in the U.S., but that fact isn't broadcast by the mainstream media day in and day out, inciting fear and increasing stress. The isolation measures, the economic shutdown, church closures, all of these and more are altering people's lives in severe, unjustifiable ways that cannot be reconciled with the known lethality of this tiny creature. Back to freedom of worship for a moment. It's important for politicians and others to understand that the church is a perfect society. She is a divine and human, heavenly and earthly reality brought into being by God, who enjoys complete autonomy in the sphere of faith and worship. The human person has a transcendent dimension in that he is called to eternal communion with the tripersonal God within the community of the church, the body of Christ. It is the church's mission and prerogative as the sacrament of salvation and the visible institution of grace and truth in the world to bring salvation to all people by incorporating them into Christ. The holy sacrifice of the Mass celebrated in the church in faith is a redemptive and saving reality, for it is truly the sacrifice of Christ on the cross represented. There's no earthly power, state, or government that has any right whatsoever to interfere with the church's divinely mandated mission and her celebration of public worship. Vivatis in Christo.